Hey, good morning, everybody. 3 weeks in a row here at my desk. It seems to be a good experience for people so far. So, for the time being, we're going to keep at it. What I like about this passage, a couple things. But first, it is easy to use as an example to show how the different authors of the Gospels utilize stories in different ways and inserted them in different places in their Gospel. You notice in the reading we have for this morning, it comes from the Gospel of John, and it occurs at the beginning of John's Gospel, the second chapter actually. What happened right before this is really the first act of Jesus' public ministry, according to John, is we have the wedding at Cana, in which Jesus turns the water into wine. And right afterwards, now we get this passage where Jesus goes to the temple and flips tables over. We get the same story, though, in Matthew and Mark's gospel, not Luke, but in Matthew and Mark, but it doesn't occur at the beginning of the gospel. It occurs at the end of the gospel. And the purpose it serves there is it is after Jesus has arrived into Jerusalem, riding in on the donkey, right? Palm Sunday, everything's at an all-time high. A climax is coming. Jesus is going to the temple, and the people are expecting something great to occur, right? Jesus is going to take his rightful place and be the king that they want him to be. But instead, what happens? Jesus goes to the temple, sees what's going on, and flips over these tables, and he essentially really rips them a new one. And in Matthew and Mark, then, this act of Jesus is the beginning of the end. Because then they go on their way, everybody else, and they conspire to kill Jesus, and they can't let him continue in this way. He's becoming too much of a threat to their power. And so then what happens shortly after? Jesus is betrayed, he's turned over to the authorities, and then he is crucified. So in Matthew and Mark, the story of Jesus turning over the tables comes at the end and acts as the straw that breaks the camel's back. In John's gospel, we have to know a bit more about John's community. So while all of this stuff, when I share with you, there's a bit of debate surrounding it, I believe there's still mainly scholarly opinion or basic agreement on John's community, which is the latest of the Gospels written. It's written about 95 AD. John's community is a small, ostracized community from the local synagogue. That because of them following Jesus, they have been kicked out and they're not welcome back in. So they're their own separate community that is been rejected. And so this passage here at the beginning of John's gospel, it almost serves as a reassurance story to them. That, see, Jesus came to overturn the system that kicked you out. Jesus came to do away with what has rejected you. And so it's almost like you made the right decision because Jesus supports you in it. That's what this story serves here in John's gospel. Now we have to be careful about that in John's gospel, because that's a theme throughout John's gospel, is it can be very harsh toward the Jewish people of the day, and it has been used frequently to support anti-Semitism. And so we can't use it that way, right? We're not trying to ostracize, we're not trying to blame one group of people for the death of Jesus, because we all in some way are guilty of it. No one stood by Jesus at the time. So you can't say it's your fault. We all would have abandoned. So I bring that up just so we are aware of how we use John, or how it has been poorly used, horribly poorly used, to cause great harm toward a group of people. But Jesus gets angry. Oftentimes we think about, you can't get angry, it's bad to get angry. And here we have an example of Jesus getting angry. In fact, you saw that passage at the beginning of when we got to the time of the sermon, where if you ever ask, what would Jesus do, right? Overturning tables and getting angry is an acceptable answer. I think there are things in our lives that should cause us anger, should evoke a strong emotional response within us. The question is, what are those things that should evoke that kind of a response? And so we need to look at what is it that is causing Jesus to be angry? And then, what is going on in our world today that should cause us to be angry as well? So Jesus is at the temple, and what does he see that's going on there? He sees people of privilege and power that are taking advantage of their place of privilege and power and authority and using it to harm other people. Because this is what happened. People of the day, good Jewish people of the day, had to go to Jerusalem, had to go to the temple once a year and offer a sacrifice. But only certain sacrifices could have been used. So you might bring something from home that you want to offer, an animal, whatever it might be, but there had to be certain kinds of animals. Or there, even if that certain kind, it had to be raised in a certain way. And so only a small group of animals would be worthy for a sacrifice. So you couldn't just bring something from home much of the time. You had to purchase your animal to sacrifice at the temple. And not only did you have to purchase your animal at the temple in order to sacrifice, but you had to purchase that animal with a specific type of money that was only acceptable at the temple, which you didn't use in other places. So you had to come, you had to exchange your money, and you had to purchase this other animal. Now, if you've ever traveled to another country, you know you have to exchange your money also when you go there. Now, if I exchange money and I have 10 US dollars and I want to get the equivalent of 10 US dollars in euros, it's actually going to cost me more than 10 US dollars, isn't it? Because there's an exchange rate. And maybe it costs me $12.50 to get $10 worth of euros. Well, the same thing was going on there, right? Again, people were taking advantage, people in power and privilege and authority, taking advantage of those who weren't as fortunate. And Jesus sees this going on and he is infuriated with it. What are you doing? This isn't what we are about. This isn't what this whole thing is for. And so what does Jesus do when he sees this going on? He flips over the tables and calls them out on it. So our question is, what should make us angry? Where do we see systems of people in privilege, position, and authority taking advantage of those things to the detriment of other people? I don't need to name those things that are going on. I think we can look around and see them ourselves. And as people of faith, we need to act on it. This is why I think it's okay to, in some sense, be political. Remember, there's a difference between being political and being partisan. Partisan means you identify with one political party. That's what partisan politics is. And that happens so frequently, almost all the time in our country, right? It's either a Republican idea or a Democrat idea. And if you're a Republican, you hate any Democratic idea. And if you're a Democrat, you hate any Republican kind of idea. That's partisan politics. Where churches and pastors and myself need to avoid is identifying our faith with one political party. There is not one party that is solely identified with our faith. And yet, because Jesus, what angers Jesus are systems or people that take advantage of others to their own detriment. We are called to get angry about that as well, to call them out and work to change it. That's politics. Politics is how we order, arrange, and choose to govern ourselves. They are the rules that we agree upon. That is how we're going to treat each other. I think God cares about those things. You've heard me say that before. And as people of faith, we should be identifying that and working to correct those abuses and harms that are going on in the world. So that's one thing that angers God. Now, unfortunately, what the church is known for, they see Jesus getting angry, they see Jesus pointing out others, and then they think the role of the church then is to simply do that all the time, specifically not to worry about those larger systems that are happening, but the church is known more for pointing out the flaws of individuals. And let me make you feel guilty about this, or let me condemn those who aren't part of the church, who aren't Christian, who aren't whatever it might be. What we should be doing at the same time as looking and calling out those systems of harm is turning inward. How do I participate? How do I perpetuate? Where do I need to repent from? Part of our prayer shouldn't just be, Lord, help me turn over the tables of systems of oppression. It should be, Lord, turn over the tables in my own life that are oppressive. Help me do the hard work that needs to be done. And that's really hard, and that's what Lent is about, doing the hard work of repenting, doing the hard work of acknowledging, doing the hard work of, Lord, turn over the tables in my life that need to be turned over. The hope, though, is when our tables are turned over, there's freedom in it. There's joy in it. That maybe we didn't even realize it, but oh my gosh, now that it's occurred, I feel like this weight has been lifted off of us. You know, have you ever gone through and for whatever reason, you've cleaned a room and you didn't think it needed to be done, but you started going and you picked up one thing and then you picked up another and then you picked up another and then you picked up another. And next thing you know, you have this whole pile of garbage that needs to be taken out on the curb. And you walk back into your house and you see this room that it's almost like you never saw it before. It strikes you in a new way and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels so good. I didn't realize how cluttered it had become. In my opinion, when we do that work in our own lives, that is the feeling that we receive from it. We maybe didn't even realize how cluttered it had been, but once we start clearing out, oh my gosh, is there freedom and relief and joy in that? That's the good news. That's the work God has called us to do. To call out systems in the world that are harming, that are oppressive, that are literally enslaving people, right? And to do that work within ourselves. And then to live in the freedom that comes with it. May you enjoy and see and be that freedom today and every day that is to come. Amen.